Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling a topic that's been making headlines and sparking debates. Bail law in India.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It really is. And to make sure we're covering all angles, we've gathered a whole bunch of sources, legal articles,
Always good to be thorough.
expert analyses, even some Supreme Court judgments.
Wow, you really went all out.
Yeah, we want to get to the bottom of this. So get ready to explore the different types of bail, the criteria for bailable versus non-bailable offenses.
I bet there are a ton of misconceptions out there.
You're telling me. And of course, we'll be diving deep into how courts make those crucial decisions about who gets to walk free while awaiting trial.
This is going to be fascinating. I can't wait to break it all down.
Me too. So let's jump right in. I think a good place to start is with the word bail itself.
Okay, back to basics.
Where does it come from? What does it actually mean in the legal world?
Well, the word bail actually has its roots in Old French, bailer, which means to give or to deliver.
Interesting. So it's like giving someone their freedom back
Well,
temporarily.
exactly, with the understanding that they'll be delivered back to the court for trial.
It's like a promise you make to the court to show up when required.
It's a mechanism that tries to balance individual liberty with the needs of justice and public safety.
Right. It ensures the accused is present during the trial, but at the same time, it upholds the presumption of innocence.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's talk about something I know trips a lot of people up. Bailable and non-bailable offenses.
Ah, yes. The source of much confusion.
Does non-bailable mean you're stuck in jail no matter what?
It's a common misconception. Non-bailable doesn't mean no bail ever. It just means the court has more discretion in deciding whether to grant it.
So it's not a guarantee, right, in those cases?
It all depends on the severity of the crime and the potential punishment.
So like stealing a candy bar versus, say, committing murder.
Yeah, those are very different scenarios. For something minor, like a petty theft, the police might be able to release you on bail right away.
But for something serious, like murder, it goes to the court, and they consider a lot more factors.
They have to weigh the risks and make a judgment call.
So it's like different levels of seriousness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the court is the ultimate judge in those more complex cases.
Okay, now let's move on to the different types of bail, because I know it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
No, not at all. In India, we have three main types: regular bail, interim bail, and anticipatory bail.
3 different flavors of freedom, so to speak.
And each one is governed by the Criminal Procedure Code, or CRPC for short.
I love those legal acronyms.
Right. So think of regular bail as the most common type.
The go-to bail.
Pretty much. It's what you apply for if you've been arrested for a non-bailable offense.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about interim bail? That sounds kind of temporary.
It is. Think of it as a short-term shield. Granted, while the court is considering your regular or anticipatory bail application.
So it's like a pause button while things get sorted out.
Exactly. It could be for a week, 2 weeks, just a short period to give the court time to make a decision.
Makes sense. Okay, last one. Anticipatory bail. What's that all about?
This one is interesting. Imagine you believe you're about to be arrested for a non-bailable offense.
Uh-oh. Sounds stressful.
Right. But maybe it's based on a false accusation or a misunderstanding.
Trying to get ahead of the curve.
Exactly. You can apply for anticipatory bail in advance, and if the court grants it, you're essentially protected from arrest.
Wow, so it's like a preemptive strike against being wrongfully detained.
It's a powerful tool to safeguard against potential misuse of the legal system.
Okay, that's really insightful. So you've got these different options depending on your situation.
It's about finding the right tool for the job.
Now, I'm curious. How do courts actually decide whether to grant bail, especially in those non-bailable cases where they have a lot of leeway?
It's a complex decision-making process.
What are they looking at? What are the factors?
Well, they consider a lot of things, but 3 key factors really stand out. First, the nature and gravity of the offense.
That makes sense. Some crimes are obviously more serious than others.
Right. If we're talking about something with a potential life sentence or the death penalty, the court is going to be much more cautious.
You don't want a potential murderer roaming free. So what's the second factor?
The conduct of the accused. Do they have a history of criminal activity? Are they likely to jump bail and disappear? Were they cooperating with the investigation?
So a squeaky clean record and a cooperative attitude definitely help your case.
Absolutely. And the third key factor is the potential impact of the accused's release on the victim, witnesses, or even public safety.
Right, you don't want to put anyone in danger.
Exactly. If there's a risk of evidence tampering, witness intimidation, or a threat to public order, the court is less likely to grant bail.
It's about protecting the integrity of the legal process.
and ensuring a fair trial for everyone involved.
So it's a complex puzzle,
Yeah.
with the court weighing all these different pieces.
Trying to find that balance between individual rights and the needs of society.
Now, are there any real-life examples of how these factors have played out in Indian courts? Cases that illustrate this decision-making process?
Oh, absolutely. One landmark case that really sheds light on all of this is the Satinder Kumar Until versus CBI case from 2023.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about this case and why it's so significant.
Well, the Satinder Kumar Until case really brought the bail, not jail principle to the forefront.
Bail, not jail.
Yeah. The Supreme Court was basically saying, hey, detention should be the exception, not the rule.
So they were pushing back against this idea of keeping people in jail before they've even been convicted.
Exactly. They even issued specific guidelines to lower courts, urging them to be more lenient with bail, especially for less serious offenses.
Wow, so the Supreme Court was really trying to make a statement here.
Oh, absolutely. It was a big
Mhm.
deal. And it's directly related to a huge problem in India, overcrowded jails.
Oh, right. We've all heard those stories about people stuck in jail for years, awaiting trial,
And a lot of them are under trials, people who haven't even been proven guilty.
just because they can't afford bail or they get lost in the system.
The Satinder Kumar and Till case was a huge step towards tackling that issue.
So it's about making sure people aren't punished before they've even had their day in court.
A fundamental principle of justice,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. But I'm guessing there's still challenges, even when bail is granted.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Granting bail is one thing, but actually getting out of jail is another.
What are some of the obstacles people face?
Finances are a huge barrier for many. Many people simply can't afford to pay the bail bond.
It just doesn't seem right.
It's heartbreaking. Imagine being granted bail but remaining stuck in jail because you can't come up with the money.
It creates a two-tiered system of justice.
And it disproportionately affects the most vulnerable in society.
So even if the court says you're free to go, your financial situation can keep you locked up.
It's a harsh reality for many.
Are there other challenges apart from the financial aspect?
Definitely. Arranging sureties can be a nightmare.
Sureties.
Yeah, those people who vouch for you guarantee you'll show up in court.
Oh, right. Like a cosigner for your freedom.
Exactly. But if you don't have a strong support network, or if your family and friends are struggling too, finding those sureties can be next to impossible.
And then there's the bureaucracy. I bet that can be a huge headache.
Oh, tell me about it. Processing and verifying documents can take weeks, sometimes even months.
So you're stuck waiting and waiting, even though you've been granted bail.
It's a system that can be really tough on people, especially those who are already disadvantaged.
So what can be done? How can we make the bail system more just and equitable?
Well, we need to find ways to address the financial burden.
Make it so that money isn't the deciding factor.
Exactly. Maybe we need to explore alternative forms of bail bonds, like community-based guarantees or something.
So the community steps up to support its members.
Exactly. And we need to tackle those bureaucratic delays head on. Technology could be a game changer here.
Oh, how so?
Imagine a system where bail applications are filed online, documents are verified digitally, hearings conducted remotely,
It would definitely speed things up.
and make the process more accessible for people in remote areas.
That's a great point. Not everyone can easily travel to court.
So technology could help level the playing field a bit.
But we have to make sure it's accessible to everyone, right?
Right.
Not just those who are tech savvy.
Oh, absolutely. We don't want to create a new set of barriers.
Now, what about the role of legal aid? I imagine having a good lawyer can make a huge difference in navigating the system.
Oh, a good lawyer can be invaluable. But not everyone can afford one, especially those from marginalized communities.
So how do we ensure that everyone has access to legal representation?
Well, we need strong public defender programs and pro bono legal services.
It's about making sure everyone has a fair shot, regardless of their financial means.
It's a fundamental right. Everyone deserves a fair trial.
Okay, now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the police.
Okay, what about them?
They're often the first point of contact for someone who's been arrested.
True, they're on the front lines.
So what power do they actually have when it comes to granting bail?
Well, it depends on the offense. For bailable offenses, they can release someone on bail right then and there.
So they have some discretion in those less serious cases.
Yeah, think of it like this. You get caught jaywalking, a minor offense.
Who hasn't done that?
Right. The police can say, okay, here's a ticket, you're free to go, but show up in court when required.
So they act as the initial gatekeeper.
Exactly. But for non-bailable offenses, They don't have the power to grant bail. That decision rests with the courts.
So if it's a more serious crime, you're going before a judge.
And that's when having a good lawyer is even more crucial.
Okay, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of applying for bail.
Getting down to the nitty-gritty.
What does that process actually look like?
Well, typically, a lawyer representing the accused will file a bail application with the appropriate court.
So it's a formal written request.
Yeah, it lays out the details of the case, the accused's background, and the reasons why bail should be granted.
It's like a legal argument, making the case for the accused's release.
Exactly. Trying to convince the judge that the accused isn't a flight risk and deserves a chance to remain free while awaiting trial.
And the prosecution will present their side of the story.
Oh, of course. They'll argue against granting bail, highlighting any concerns they have.
So it's a back and forth, a legal tug of war.
And the judge has to weigh all the arguments and make the final call.
Now, let's say bail is granted. It's not always as simple as paying a bond and walking out, right?
Not always. Courts often impose certain conditions.
Rules to follow while you're out on bail.
Exactly. Things like surrendering your passport so you can't flee the country.
Makes sense. What else?
Restrictions on travel, regular reporting to the police station, and of course, no contact with the victim or witnesses.
So it's about making sure the accused doesn't interfere with the case.
Right. It's about balancing individual liberty with the need to protect the integrity of the legal process.
Okay, now here's something I've always wondered about. Default bail.
Ah, yes. It's also known as statutory bail.
What's that all about?
It's a safeguard against indefinite detention.
So you can't just keep someone locked up forever without trial.
Exactly. Default bail kicks in when the investigating agency fails to file a charge sheet within a certain time frame.
So it's like a time limit for the police to get their act together.
Precisely. It's designed to prevent undue delays and protect the rights of the accused.
But there are exceptions, right?
Oh, yes. For very serious offenses like murder or terrorism, default bail might not be granted, even if the charge sheet is delayed.
Okay, so it's a balancing act, as always.
Trying to find that sweet spot between individual rights and public safety.
Now, we've talked a lot about bail during the pre-trial stage, but what about after someone is convicted?
Good question. There is such a thing as post-conviction bail.
Wait, really? You can get bail after you've been found guilty?
In certain situations, yes. It's typically granted if there's an appeal pending.
So you're challenging the verdict, hoping to overturn the conviction.
Exactly. And while that appeal is going on, you might be eligible for bail.
The court is basically giving you a chance to exhaust all legal options.
They'll consider things like the strength of your appeal, the potential sentence, and the likelihood of you absconding.
So there's still hope, even after a conviction.
The legal process can be long and winding.
Okay, I think our listeners probably wondering about some of the more practical aspects of bail.
Like, how much does it cost? What happens to the money?
Exactly. Those everyday questions that people have.
Let's dive into those.
Hmm.
So first up, what is a bail bond and how much does it usually cost?
Yeah, break it down for us.
A bail bond is basically a financial guarantee.
Like insurance.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It assures the court that the accused will show up for all their court dates.
You're putting down money to prove you're serious about following the rules.
Exactly. The amount varies depending on the severity of the offense, the flight risk, and the accused's financial situation.
So there's no fixed price.
No, it's determined on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, next question. What happens to that bail bond money if the accused does show up for all their court appearances?
If they follow all the rules and attend every hearing, they get their money back at the end of the trial.
It's like a reward for good behavior.
You could say that, but what happens if they violate the conditions of their bail?
Do they automatically go back to jail?
It depends on the severity of the violation.
So some violations are worse than others.
For minor things, like missing a court date because of a genuine emergency, the court might just issue a warning.
Or maybe tighten the bail conditions.
Exactly. But for serious violations like tampering with evidence or trying to flee, the court can issue a warrant and revoke their bail.
So back to jail they go.
It's about consequences, you know? You break the rules, there are repercussions.
Okay, last question for now. Can someone apply for bail multiple times if their initial application is rejected?
Absolutely. It's not a one-and-done situation.
So there's always hope.
They can present new arguments or evidence, especially if circumstances have changed.
Like if new witnesses come forward or if the investigation reveals new information.
Exactly. It's about giving people a chance to make their case and fight for their freedom.
This has been so insightful. We've really dug deep into the complexities of bail law in India.
We've explored the different types of bail, the challenges people face, the role of the courts and the police.
And we've even touched on those practical questions that everyone has about bail bonds and court appearances.
It's a fascinating area of law, full of nuances and real-world implications.
We've only just begun to scratch the surface. Welcome back to the deep dive. We spent a lot of time in the weeds of bail law in India. But now I kind of want to zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Okay, yeah. The forest for the trees.
Exactly. Because bail law isn't just about legal technicalities, right? It reflects something deeper about us, about our values as a society,
It raises some really big questions, doesn't it? About individual liberty, about fairness,
about how much power the legal system should have.
and whether it's being used responsibly.
Yeah, exactly. It's about people's lives, their freedom. So what are some of those big questions we need to ask ourselves as we think about the future of bail in India?
Well, one that keeps coming up for me is how do we balance the presumption of innocence with the need to protect public safety?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? You want to uphold the idea that someone is innocent until proven guilty,
But at the same time, you don't want to put victims or witnesses at risk.
or jeopardize the whole case. So how do we find that balance? How do we make sure the system is working for everyone?
That's the million-dollar question. And another thing we need to think about is how to make the bail system more sensitive to the needs of different groups.
Like you were saying earlier about the financial burden.
Right. But it goes beyond just money, right? There are issues of caste, gender, social marginalization,
These factors can make it even harder for someone to navigate the legal system.
and to get a fair shake. So we need to ask ourselves, are we creating a level playing field, or are we perpetuating existing inequalities?
Now, you mentioned earlier that technology could play a role in making the bail process more efficient.
Oh, yeah. Imagine a system where everything is online, applications, document verification, even hearings.
That would definitely streamline things.
Cut down on delays, make the process more accessible for people in remote areas.
But we have to be careful, right? Make sure we don't leave anyone behind.
Absolutely. Not everyone has access to computers or the internet.
So we need to think about digital literacy, providing resources, making sure everyone can benefit from these advancements.
No one should be excluded because of the digital divide.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final question, something to ponder as they think about this complex topic.
Get me with it.
How do we move beyond this simplistic bail versus jail debate? How do we develop a more nuanced understanding of what bail is really about?
I love that. It's about seeing the bigger picture, recognizing that bail isn't a reward or a punishment,
It's a mechanism, a tool.
a way to uphold fundamental principles of justice while ensuring the legal process can run its course.
It's about finding that delicate balance, right, between individual liberty and the needs of society as a whole.
Exactly. And I think that's a great place to leave it.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much ground.
From the history of bail law to the challenges it faces, the potential reforms, the human stories.
We've really gotten into the nitty-gritty, and hopefully our listeners have come away with a deeper understanding of this complex issue.
And maybe some food for thought.
Always.
Huh.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of bail law in India.